Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hello. Good to see some familiar faces, and really appreciative and thankful for MetricsDAO hosting us for this third and final part of the live workshop. So this is workshop 3, where we'll be continuing the work we did last week on building dashboards, but also web apps using Subgrounds as the transformation layer. So basically a Subgrounds powered web app that you can share with your friends and colleagues and community. However, last week we stopped at building the Dash app locally on your system. And I'll do a quick recap of what we did, and then we'll continue the journey to the desirable cloud instance of your app, which is what we're all here for. So let's jump in. Quick review. So the first workshop we talked about Subgrounds. We went under the hood and went into a deep dive on how to use Subgrounds to interact with data index on the graph network, and how Subgrounds allows you to maintain your Python familiarity for Python environments in performing advanced data analytics without learning any new skills or tool sets. And then we also introduced you to the visualization component that's wrapped into Subgrounds called Dash, which is an open source data visualization and data analytics library that we've built into Subgrounds. That way you don't have to necessarily leave your programming environment to create visualizations. And using the Dash library that's built into Subgrounds allows you to then build these powerful web apps, because it abstracts away the full stack technical requirements and skills required to build a web app, and it allows you to build your dashboards and your applications in pure Python as well. We also jump into how to construct a standard visualization with Subgrounds, the workflow required, starting from importing your Subgrounds library in Dash, constructing your query, generating and constructing the app layer itself, and then rendering your work into a dashboard. We went over the breakdown of what your code could look like from top to bottom, from importing your library to the rendered visualization. All of these will be available, or are also currently available, in the Git book that the MetricsDAO community has access to. After that, we discussed taking things a little more ahead and going from just simple visualization to actually creating apps that are powered by Subgrounds, but also the graph. And went over each layer to discuss how they're interconnected and interfaced, and how Subgrounds leverages the subgraph layer to power up your Dash apps. Went over the breakdown on the different layers, starting from the Subgrounds layer, where you import your library, construct your synthetic fields, and of course construct your query type, and how to interface that with the app construction layer, where you import your Dash libraries along with the Subgrounds constructions that you've created in the Subgrounds layer, and the methods or construction approach that you can use to create your visualization layout, and how to render that. The resources are available again in the Git book that's available to all MetricsDAO community members. And that's a recap of where we stopped last week. So if we were to pull up let me pull up the code. Here we go. This is the notebook that we provided in the GitHub repo that goes over step by step on how to go from Subgrounds to visualization. We have the cell blocks that shows you how to import your libraries, interface with the subgraph by plugging in the API of interest, constructing your synthetic fields. In this example, we created the date time, the state supply, percentage, and the RFV by Clima being our target protocol for this demo. And of course, constructed our query types to get us 1 year's worth of data and the latest data point available. And of course, went over in this notebook showing you how to import your libraries for visualization and construct the visualization component, in this case, a simple figure that would hold a scatter plot, and what that scatter plot could look like once it's been rendered. Once that was done, we then broke apart the notebook into two files, which was the subgrounds layer and the dashboard or the app construction layer, where the subgrounds layer was the same code that we had written in the notebook, and the app construction layer had more breakdown of how we wanted to lay out and display the data that our subgrounds was querying. Once that was done, we rendered and ran the app. In this case, it was running locally on my PC, 127.0.0.1.8050, and we had a locally running app that was pulling live data from the blockchain. In this case, for MetricsDAO, showing us the market cap, the price, the UI, total value deposited, and we had created a nice grid system to create visually appealing charts that could be styled as much as you want. So today's goal is to take this local app and create a cloud-hosted app with its own unique URL. In this case, I've just created an example called subgroundsdemo.herokuapp.com. And this app itself becomes something you can share with your communities, possibly embed in a website, or use it to improve your portfolio, for instance, if you're a freelance data analyst. As you can see, the data output are the same because they are pulling from the same subgraph and they're both powered by Subgrounds. So without further ado, let's jump in and see how we can take things to the next level. So I'm going to minimize this and show you the first step. As Forgard mentioned, I've provided you with a step-by-step guide, and I suggest if you have access to that, to pull it up on your device, your phone or your computer, while you're watching this demo, or if you're watching a recording of it, to follow each step as I will walk you through how to go from step 1 all the way to step 16 and get your app up and ready. So let's get started. The first step is to create a Heroku account. In this case, if you do not have one, you will need to sign up. It's free if you're a hobbyist, and you can get up and running in no time. I already have an account, and I've played around with some data apps as well. But once you have your account created, you'll be presented with this dashboard for your account, and it's as simple as clicking New. When you click New, you say, I would like to create a new app. So you click App. Okay, once that's done, this is where you get creative and choose a name. In this case, let's just call this Subgrounds Demo 3. So this is going to be the URL name for the app we're building today, Subgrounds Demo 3. Once you're satisfied with that, you just click Create, and Heroku sets up your environment for you. So all you have to do now is just follow the instructions, really. But there is some configurations that we'll have to do. So once your Subgrounds Demo 3 instance has been created, the next step is to install the Heroku CLI on your local machine. Again, Heroku has done a fantastic job in making our lives really easy. So you can just easily click the Heroku CLI link and download the CLI on your machine, follow the prompt, and once that's done, you're ready to go. So once that's done, the work on the Heroku side is on hold for now. Now we get to do the fun stuff, the actual programming, right? So let's go ahead and jump in here. I will minimize this. The first step you want to do is, after you've downloaded the Heroku CLI, is create a new project on your favorite development environment. I like using PyCharms because it's clean, it's easy, it's what I've used for many, many years. But you don't have to use PyCharm. You can use VS, whatever environment you like. It doesn't matter. The steps are pretty similar. But in our example, we're using PyCharm. So we're going to create a new project for this demo in our PyCharm. So to do that, I say File, New Project, And in this case, I have a prompt that basically helps me create a new project. And I would just basically here, I'm just going to create a new, let me create a new project, a new folder here. Let's call it Subgrounds Demo 3. Create, open. So that's step 1. The next step is to choose our virtual environment for our development. In this case, I'm presented with the option to go Pyenv, Conda, but we want to make sure we choose virtual environment for this example or this demo. So we click virtual environment. The next step is to make sure our base interpreter is using the right Python version. We want to use 3.10, and the reason for that is Subgrounds is developed, the core of Subgrounds is developed to depend on a lot of features and functionalities that are only available on Python 3.10 and above. So you would need to make sure that the environment you're working with is the base interpreter is version 3.10 and above as well. So that's verified there, virtual environment, we have our folder, we are good to go. So I hit create. Yep, new window, that's okay. I'm going to minimize this so it doesn't distract us too much. All right, cool. Now we have our project created, but it's empty. Since we want to essentially replicate, we want to transfer what we did last week from our local machine to the cloud, we're going to short circuit the process a little bit. Normally, this is where you start creating your Subgrounds layer file and your app construction layer file and interfacing them with each other. And again, if you would like to know how to do that, please refer to the workshop number 2 to kind of follow the guide on how to build the app that we've shown here running locally. But because we're taking that, yes.
We've got a question in the workshops group. Can you just quickly explain why we use a virtual environment?
Yes, of course. So it's usually it's standard practice to kind of create an isolated programming environment when building apps or working with any data analytics work. And that's because sometimes you might have libraries or dependencies that might either require something that's newer, for example, like a newer version of a library that might be what you need for your current project, but could break the dependencies on other projects that require older versions of that library. So it's nice to have a clean blank canvas, a clean environment where you can install the libraries in that environment that are necessary for your app. You don't want any crosstalk really. So it's not just a Subgrounds practice. It's generally a programming. I recommend it practice when writing new projects. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. It looks like the question was about virtual environment versus Pyenv or Conda, but that was a great overview of why we'd use virtual environments in general. But could Conda or another one be used as well, like Pyenv?
Yes, absolutely. You can use Pyenv. In this example, I would actually also use Pyenv to install the requirements, as you would see. But I'd like to generally start with a virtual environment just to create something isolated and clean from every other project that's running on my computer live. But you can use Pyenv, and that's fine. And we will cover that on the second half of this workshop today, actually, how to do that.
Cool, thanks.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the next step generally after creating a project is to create your Subgrounds layer and your app construction layer, but we've already done that. We did that in the last workshop. So to short circuit the process, what we're going to do is kind of, take the easier route. The files that we created last week for the app, I'm just going to copy them into this new project. Okay, so I'm going to put them here, just to make life easy for us. We really only care about make this bigger. really only care about the subgrounds layer and the app construction layer, right? So, and of course the notebook, because why not? Delete it. It's not necessary for our app, but I just copied the whole file in there. And again, the reason is we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to keep the objective of this workshop focused on converting our local app to a Heroku hosted app. Okay, so now we have our file. We have basically short-circuited step 5 and just copied it in there. The next step is to open our app construction layer and make some modifications there. In this case, the app construction file is here. And the next step is just to simply say server equals app.server. And this is a way to communicate Dash, basically communicate to Dash that Heroku, and Heroku to Dash as well, that the app will be running on a Heroku server as well. So that's it for that step. Server equals app.server. Now, step 7. Within our development environment, we want to go ahead and open a terminal and make sure we are pointing to our directory. So for PyCharm, I usually just have to click the tab down here, and I am indeed pointing into my project directory, so I can jump to step 8. This is where I start installing the dependencies and the libraries that are required to run my app. For the app to run, I need Plotly, I need Dash, I need Dash Bootstrap, of course I need Subgrounds, Millify, and Unicorn, which helps us run web applications. So let's go ahead and do the installation. In this case, I'm just going to use Pyenv because it has some other helper tools in there that makes it easy to install requirements. So I'll say Pyenv install Dash. And in this case, sometimes you might have an issue installing Dash and it doesn't have Plotly installed properly. But if you install Dash, generally speaking, Plotly would come in that package as well. So just FYI, I listed all of these here as a sort of backup plan in case one of the libraries does not install any of the one that it's supposed to during the installation process. So let's wait for Dash to install, and after that, I'll install Dash Bootstrap. And while we're doing that, I'm going to check the workshop channel. Make sure I have any questions. Stouffer, thank you so much for manning the station. This is usually where I go make my 10th cup of coffee for the day. So the next thing we want to install is the Dash Bootstrap component. So and the reason for the Dash Bootstrap, what did I do wrong? Oh, doesn't know what I want. So I have to like garbage in, garbage out, right? You don't tell it exactly what you want, and then no. So the reason for the Dash Bootstrap components is we wanted to provide styling and CSS standard CSS style components to make our app look pretty and have some styling that we want. So that's the reason we have the Dash Bootstrap there. Looks like that's successfully installed. The last step is Subgrounds. Well, almost the last step. It's done. Shouldn't take too long. Awesome. And Millify. And could have just done this. And Unicorn to help our app run on the web. That's the last installation I promised. Does everyone have any issues seeing my screen? Do I need to zoom in, or is the visual pretty clear?
I see it pretty clearly.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Creating a pip file lock for me.
Maybe if you want to
Awesome.
zoom in a little bit, some people are having a little trouble.
Okay. Let's see. I think if I do full screen mode. All right, so everything is installed. We have all of the installation requirements done. The next step is to create what is called a git ignore file. So to do that, we go back to our directory, select the root, right click on that, create new. Again, this workflow could look different based on your preferred environment. But for PyCharm, it's just right click on the directory itself, new file, and you say .git ignore. And in here, we want to tell Heroku what files to ignore when we push Heroku. In this case, I've listed the files that don't really matter and Heroku should not really pay attention to. So it's in the list is in that documentation provided. So we have the virtual env file with some metadata in there, and that should be good. Once that's done, you close it, and you want to create a new file called a Proc File. So let's go ahead and do that. Proc File. And in the Proc File, we want to communicate to Heroku what file our app is. So in this case, the template here is web.gunicorn, the app file without the .py server. So what are we doing here? We're going to replace everything from your to .py with the name of our app construction file. In this case, it's Klima Analytics Dashboard. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take this, copy that, Klima _ analytics _ dashboard. And there is no .py in there. Good to go. Close that. And now Heroku is ready to communicate and run our file. But to do that, it also needs to know what requirements and what libraries to install on the back end. So to do that, the next step, step 11 in our step-by-step guide, is to do a pip freeze and auto-generate the requirements text file so Heroku knows what to install. To do that, go here, and we type that in, pip freeze requirements.txt, enter, and we wait a few seconds, and our environment is going to generate, pip is essentially going to generate a requirement file with every single library that we need for our app. So let's give it a little bit of time. There it is. Perfect. So if I click that, you would see everything the stuff that you didn't know you needed and the things that you expect that you needed, like dash bootstrap core, HTML, dash tables for interactivity, Flask, GUnicorn itself, Jupyter Lab, and Subgrounds, the latest version of Subgrounds that's released, all automatically installed for you. Let's close that. One more thing to know for Heroku is it defaults to Python 3.9, I believe. So they've not made any updates to the base Python version, but we know that Subgrounds requires Python 3.10. So we need to do a little bit of work. So to do that, we'll have to create something called a runtime. Runtime basically tells Heroku that override your default Python version, which is 3.9, with Python version I want to use explicitly. And just to make sure I am consistent, let me open this in here. Where did I put it? Sorry. Make sure I use the exact version. Copy. Awesome. So we want to use the newest version of Python, Python 3.10.4, and close that. So now we have our runtime file, our requirements file, we have our pip file. Our pip file basically shows you all of the packages that Heroku will install. In this case, GUnicorn, Millify, Plotly. So let's close that. And I believe we are good to go. So let me go ahead and make things clean here. The next step is to now call back our Heroku workflow. To do that, we will need to log into Heroku. So we open our terminal back and just make life easy for us. We'll do a copy pasta, copy it here, and paste it. So now we are logging into our Heroku account. You can't see it here. Let me show you what that looks like here on my side. So I'm off screen with this because I'm about to put in my login credentials, but this is essentially what you will be presented when you try to copy the same workflow on your end. So let me go ahead and log in here. One moment. Give me a few seconds to load in. Okay, I'm logged in. So now my terminal, my environment is now logged into my Heroku repo. So everything I do, Heroku would sense it, and now we can have some fun. The next thing we need to do is initialize Git. Let's go ahead and copy that. Git init. And so if you go back to the instructions here, once you've done Git init, you want to copy this line that's provided to you by Heroku itself. Copy, paste. Boop. We're connected remotely, and now the last 3 steps required to deploy to the cloud. So let's do git add. Instead of git make it better, let's put something more meaningful. So let's just say app launch. Yeah, enter. All right, cool. It's creating everything we need. Now let's go ahead and push our app to the server. Okay, it's building our app for us. It's building up the packages, it's installing them, organizing everything it needs to do. This might take a minute or two. And so let's put a pause here, grab some coffee or tea, or just reflect on what we've just done and take a minute.
Or a POAP.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect time for a POAP break.
Yes. So I will pass the mic off to someone for a POAP, I guess. Thank you. Love those POAPs. While we're doing that, it looks like the build is finished, and now our app is live on cloud. So to do that, I've put in my second browser here to show you I still have my local instance running on my machine, but Heroku has now provided me with a link to the web app. So if you click that, look at that. So now we have our Subgrounds Demo 3 for the protocol metrics that we performed last week, showing the market cap, claimant price, current APY, live updates. Now, what's cool about this is this can be added to your portfolio. This could be put on, like embedded into another website. This is now your app. This belongs to you. This is the power that we're trying to provide to data analysts like yourself, and empowering you with the tools to go from index data on the blockchain, simple Python development environment, basic Dash and Bootstrap layouts, as we discussed with the grid systems, and loading your app on a website. I see this as a weekend project. It's going to be really cool. And I'm really excited to see what a lot of you come up with using Subgrounds. So thank you so much for your time. And before rounding things off, I would love to pass the mic off to Stouffer to do a quick recap. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been aggregating a lot of questions and feedback from you, the community, on common questions that have been recurring. And we'd like to take the opportunity to answer some of those, specifically how to organize and set up your development environment from scratch to work with Subgrounds. So Stouffer, if you don't mind, taking the wheel here and giving a quick recap.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Share my screen. Yeah, so we've had a lot of questions about, how do you get started with Subgrounds? How do you set up your environment? How do you install Python 3.10? So yeah, in this little sub workshop, I guess, we'll go over how to do that. I'm using VS Code and I'm using Linux as my main OS, but the workflow is pretty similar for other OSs and other IDEs, I think. In any case, let's get to it. So, and I'll also be using pipenv instead of virtualenv this time. And the first thing you want to do is you want to install Pyenv. And this is how to install Pyenv is going to vary depending on your OS. In my case, I install it using the Arch Linux package manager, but if you're using Mac OS, you can install it with brew. And what Pyenv does is it allows pipenv to install different versions of Python. So like automatically, right, depending on your requirements. So once you have Pyenv installed, well, you can then create your pipenv virtual environment. Right here, I'm in like an empty directory where we're going to be creating the environment. So pipenv install subgrounds, also install the IPY kernel package. And to tell pipenv that you want to use Python 3.10, you add this additional argument here, -- Python 3.10. And if you have Pyenv installed, this will allow pipenv to pull the specific Python version automatically. So we run this. It'll take a minute. Oh, and FYI, to install pipenv itself, you can install it using pip. So pip install pipenv. It's recommended to use pip to install pipenv because that will pull the latest version. Whereas if you use your package manager to install pipenv, sometimes you might get an outdated version, which I think the version of pipenv that's in the Ubuntu package repository is outdated, and it has some issues when you try to install Python 3.10. So use pip to install pipenv. All right, so now that we've run this command here, it has created a Pyenv environment within our directory. You'll see two new files, the pip file and the pipfile.lock. And we've also installed Subgrounds and IPY kernel at the same time. IPY kernel is necessary to run the Python 3.10 in a Jupyter notebook. So this is why we have that package as well. So once this is set up, then we can essentially just create like a little file. I'll just copy the code that I have here. Oh yeah, and you might see that, like it doesn't recognize Subgrounds. That's because you need to you can close and reopen VS Code to refresh the ID, or you can just use the reload window command here, which will refresh VS Code. So not there. Right. Okay. If you go to the command palette, which you can access using this, and you type Python, you'll get an option to select the interpreter. And here you'll get I have a lot of them because I have many Pyenv projects, but you'll see that you'll essentially find your local Python installation in your directory. If you look for it here, so here, my project, right? Because we're in the my project directory. So we select that, and yeah, there you go. It detects Subgrounds, which we've just installed. So this is just like a little code to make sure everything works right. We're just querying like some pairs from the SushiSwap subgraph and printing out the resulting data frame. If you want to execute that file, you have essentially two options. The first one is to use Pyenv to run the file, right? So you can do that using the following command: Pyenv run, and then whatever the thing you want to run within the Pyenv environment comes afterwards. So in this case, it's Python main.py. Run this, and it will output the data frame as we specified. If you don't want to write Pyenv run every time, you can also write Pyenv shell, and this will kind of put your terminal inside the virtual environment. So now when you run Python main.py, it will, it will be in the virtual environment. So it will have access to the libraries you installed. And, if you try to run Python main.py without Pyenv run, or without being inside the Pyenv virtual environment, you'll get a module not found error. And yeah, and I'll also show you how to set up a notebook so that it uses the Pyenv virtual environment. So we'll just copy the same code here. So you'll notice that, if you try to run this, it's going to ask you like which kernel you want to use for the Jupyter notebook. There's also a button here, select kernel, where you can tell VS Code which Python version you want to be using for that notebook. And in our case, we want to select the version that was installed by Pyenv for our current directory, right? So again, my project, because this is where we are. And so once you've selected the kernel, you can run this, and ta-da, And these naming conventions are Pyenv specific, right? So like when you use Pyenv to create a virtual environment, the name of that virtual environment will always be the name of your directory followed by I think like 8 or so random characters. And if you use something else than Pyenv, usually VS Code will be able to detect your virtual environment as well, right? So in the notebook UI here, you can select like the globally installed versions. Here is all the Pyenv virtual environments that I have on my machine. And there's also Poetry, virtualenv. So this is how you would set up a notebook environment inside VS Code. So yeah, so to recap, you start with, here, I'll just post this here. I'll post this in the workshop Discord channel as well. You start by installing Pyenv, then you install Pyenv if you don't already have it. You create your project and you initialize the virtual environment using this command. And then you can, you can write some code that uses subgrounds, run it with pyenv.run or pyenv run or pyenv shell followed by this here. And like this. So I hope this clears up a bit of the confusion when it comes to installing subgrounds and getting your environment ready to use subgrounds. If anyone has any other questions related to subgrounds installation or subgrounds as a whole, you can do a little Q&A right now. So I see Plotmo saying if I prefer VS Code over using Jupyter Lab. Yeah, that's kind of just the workflow I've found that works best, right? Because like you never leave VS Code. Essentially, you have all your code there in one place. Yeah, and as Mochan said in the chat, it's going to be, yeah, irrespective of whether or not you want to use subgrounds, you'll still need to install the extension and the Python extension, which comes with like a lot of nice features for using Python within VS Code.
Awesome. Just wanted to emphasize that, while Subgrounds is new, we would love to see a lot of examples and creative projects that you come up with. We love building examples, especially within the Playgrounds Discord and just internally, just playing around with all kinds of protocols. So feel free to stop by the Playgrounds server as well and show off your work. Love to kind of see what crazy cool examples that you create using Subgrounds. Looking forward to kind of seeing what you come up with moving forward. And of course, a big update is coming very soon with Subgrounds 1.0. So keep an eye out for that too. But yeah, thank you so much, Stouffer, for going over the recap on setting up the environment. And again, we want to, on behalf of the entire Playgrounds team, thank MetricsDAO and thank everyone in this call for this amazing 3 weeks of this workshop. It's been really fun, a lot of great conversations, a lot of questions, and really excited to see Subgrounds be used by so many people. So thank you everyone.
Absolutely. No, thank you guys for coming on and going through this. Potmo, thank you for asking for the Subgrounds Discord, because I was just about to hop on and say, can you please link to that so people have a place to go join in? I know there is a channel in there for the Subgrounds tool. If there are any questions, we'd absolutely love to see some bounty answers leverage this capability and build some really customized graphs and charts. That'd be a really cool addition to, the flip side and the Dune charts that we already have coming in through our bounty program. That would be pretty awesome. I know I'm going to dive into this over the next week or so and see what I can put together. I used Subgrounds in a Jupyter notebook, but I had no way, or I just didn't know how to actually put it together into a dashboard. So absolutely love that you guys went through this. That's pretty sick. So I see that Discord's been linked to in the workshops channel. Head on over there. If you've got any questions, I'll probably be there sometime in the next week as I run into problems of my own trying to figure all this out. But once again, thank you guys so much. This has been awesome. For everyone else that is here or not able to make it, it'll be recorded and posted so that you can go back. I know I'll be going back as well, and it'll end up in that Git book page. But once again, this is awesome content. Can't wait to dive in myself. Awesome. Well, I am going to disconnect. See you guys around Discord.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.